He wasn't supposed to end up here. Not the spare prince. Not the soldier who walked behind his mother's coffin. Not the man who once stood on palace balconies while crowds screamed his name. But there he was, fog on the windows, engine humming in the dark, sleeping upright in the back seat of an SUV that smelled like cold leather and old coffee. Exile doesn't always come with a crown ripped off your head. Sometimes it comes quietly in missed calls, unopened letters, and gates that don't open anymore. The mansion had been the dream. Stone walls, sweeping lawns, imported everything. It was supposed to be freedom. California's sunlight instead of royal shadow. Cameras on their terms. Deals, documentaries, reinvention. Instead, the gates were sealed. Red notice, legal paper, quiet foreclosure whispers that turned into locked doors. Staff gone, rooms emptied. A grand piano wheeled out like a prop after the final scene of a show that never got renewed. And suddenly, the prince with the Netflix deal had nowhere official to sleep. He told himself it was temporary. A few nights. Privacy, space to think, but nights turned into a pattern. Gym parking lots, coastal turnouts, dark corners where security cameras were old and no one asked questions. The world didn't know yet, but the palace did. You think royal walls don't have ears across oceans? Please. Information travels faster when it's wrapped in embarrassment. William saw the reports first, not from tabloids, from quiet channels. Advisors, financial summaries, security briefings with too many red flags and not enough reassurance. His younger brother wasn't just struggling, he was spiraling. No stable residence, mounting debts, deals stalling, payments demanded back, friends who once opened their homes now unavailable. And worst of all, the children drifting between places that changed faster than headlines. That was the line. You can fight your family, you can write books, you can sell stories. But when instability starts circling children with royal blood, the institution doesn't blink, it calculates. Harry didn't see the calculation happening. He was too busy trying to hold together a life that had been built on image faster than infrastructure. Meetings that went nowhere, lawyers asking for documents he didn't have, old allies suddenly between projects, messages left on read. Meanwhile, she was still photographed, immaculate, glowing, stepping out of sleek buildings with green juice and sunglasses that cost more than a monthly rent in the city he now slept on the edge of. Separate arrivals, separate exits, separate narratives. Once they had been a brand, rebellion with good lighting. Now they looked like two people running different survival strategies. And the distance between them wasn't measured in miles. It was measured in panic. He told people he was handling it, that deals were coming, that the house situation was complicated paperwork. But paperwork doesn't make you sleep in a car. Shame does, pride does, and the stubborn belief that asking for help means admitting the fairy tale cracked. Across the ocean, the conversations got colder. No more emotional debates. No more he just needs time. This wasn't about personality anymore. It was about precedent, about the message sent if a royal who publicly detonated the system could quietly return when the money ran out. The answer forming behind palace doors was simple. No bailout. Not from public funds. Not from private duchy income. Not wrapped in a discreet family support arrangement. Because rescuing him wouldn't look like compassion. It would look like weakness. And monarchies survive on perception more than power. Still, William didn't sleep easily. Because this wasn't just a case file. It was the boy who once shared bunk beds at Balmoral. The teenager who acted out because grief had nowhere to go. The man who laughed loudest at private jokes no one else heard. But affection doesn't override duty, especially when cameras are waiting for a crack. Back in California, Harry started moving more at night. Less chance of being noticed. Less chance of being photographed stepping out of a vehicle that wasn't parked in a driveway. He kept the engine running longer than he should. Warmth costs fuel. Fuel costs money. Everything costs money when income is delayed and bills are not. He scrolled through old photos sometimes. Kids in gardens, birthday cakes, sunlit interviews about building a better future. It's amazing how loud silence gets when plans fail. He thought about calling, not lawyers, not agents, family. But every time he opened the contact, he pictured headlines, conditions, conversations that wouldn't end with come home, but with on what terms. And pride slammed the door shut before he could press dial. Meanwhile, whispers began leaking anyway. A sighting here, a blurry image there, Prince spotted alone. Where are they living? Why separate appearances? The narrative he once controlled started writing itself, and it wasn't flattering. He felt it. That shift when sympathy turns into suspicion. He had left to escape the system. Now he was outside it, with no safety net and no script. And the most dangerous thought of all began creeping in during those long, sleepless hours in the driver's seat. If they wouldn't help him, maybe he still had something they wanted. Memories, stories, private moments, things said behind doors with gold handles and ancestral portraits staring down. Information is currency, and a desperate man holding untold stories is never powerless. Somewhere in London, advisors were already gaming that scenario out. What if he talks again? What if this time it's not just interviews, but names, documents, details that blur lines between private family and public institution? Containment plans formed quietly, legal reviews, media strategies built around one principle: stay calm, stay dignified, never look rattled. Because panic feeds scandal, and scandal feeds him. The tragedy was no longer just personal, it was strategic. A standoff not with weapons, but with narratives. One side had a palace, the other had nothing left to lose. And on a cold California night, under a streetlight that flickered like it couldn't decide whether to stay on or give up, a prince stared through a fogged windshield and realized exile isn't a place. It's the moment you understand there's no road back the way you came. Morning came without ceremony. No palace curtains pulled back by staff, no schedule printed on cream card. Just pale light leaking through the windshield and the dull ache in his neck from another night folded into a space never meant for sleep. For a few seconds he forgot where he was. Then the cold steering wheel under his hand reminded him. This was what the title had turned into. Exile without announcement. He checked his phone. 3 missed calls from an unknown number. 1 email marked urgent from legal. 2 messages from a contact he hadn't saved but knew by heart. He didn't open any of them because messages meant decisions, and decisions meant consequences he wasn't ready to face before coffee. He drove aimlessly at first, letting the early traffic swallow him. Invisibility inside motion. Just another car on the Pacific Coast Highway, except one of them carried a man who used to travel with motorcades and outriders. He told himself this was freedom. No schedule, no briefing folders, no advisors telling him what not to say. But freedom without stability starts to feel like falling. Back in London, stability was exactly what they were manufacturing. Meetings stacked on meetings, legal frameworks reviewed, public statements drafted and redrafted until every word could survive forensic analysis. The strategy was brutal in its simplicity. Do nothing emotional, do nothing reactive, do nothing that looks like fear. Let him move first. Let him speak first. Let him look reckless while the institution looks patient. William understood the optics better than anyone. He hated that he did, because every calm public appearance, every handshake, every speech about duty now carried a shadow, a brother sleeping in a vehicle thousands of miles away. But monarchy isn't built on visible guilt. It's built on visible control, and control meant distance. Harry pulled into a beach overlook and cut the engine. Waves rolled in, indifferent. Seagulls screamed like they were arguing with the sky. He stared at the horizon and tried to remember when everything started to feel like a negotiation instead of a life. The interviews had felt like justice at the time. The deals had felt like independence. Telling their truth had felt like reclaiming power. Now, every past decision echoed differently. Truth sells once. After that, it becomes inventory, and inventory runs out. He finally opened the email from legal. Words like liability, exposure, and urgent response required jumped off the screen. Old contracts were circling back. Advances tied to projects that never materialized. Deadlines that didn't care about personal crises. Money that had once felt endless now looked like a maze of obligations. He laughed under his breath, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. A prince worrying about invoices in a car with a half-empty tank. If this were a film, audiences would call it unrealistic. Reality doesn't care about narrative symmetry. His phone buzzed again. This time, he answered. Silence for a second on the other end. Then a voice he knew too well. Careful, measured, not unkind, but not soft either. We need to talk about options. Options. That word again. It used to mean opportunities. Now it meant compromises. He listened. Terms floated through the speaker. Mediation, public posture, private agreements, stabilizing the situation. Every phrase translated into the same truth. Nothing would be simple and nothing would be unconditional. After the call ended, he sat still for a long time. The pride that had fueled every defiant step away from the palace now felt heavier than the crown he once resented. Because pride doesn't keep you warm at night. Across the ocean, another conversation unfolded in a quieter room with thicker walls. What if he goes nuclear? One advisor asked. William didn't look up from the folder in front of him. Then we don't. It sounded cold. It was meant to. Because escalation is a trap, and the monarchy had centuries of experience avoiding traps laid by emotion. Still, there was one factor no strategy paper could solve: the children. Their names came up again and again in briefings, always with a pause afterward. Logistics, schooling, environment, stability, not politics, not image, just stability. Even institutions built on tradition have lines that aren't negotiable. Back in California, Harry finally checked the messages he'd avoided. One was simple: a photo, 2 small backpacks by a door he didn't recognize. No caption, no accusation, just reality, delivered without commentary. Something inside him shifted then. Not rage, not defiance, clarity. Exile was one thing when it was about him, his reputation, his battles, his wounded pride. It was something else when drift started becoming their childhood. He leaned back in the seat and closed his eyes. For the first time in months, the fight didn't feel external. It felt internal. Not how do I win, but what do I fix first? Winning is loud, fixing is quiet, and quiet doesn't trend. Somewhere deep down, he knew the next move wouldn't be a grand gesture or a headline-grabbing revelation. It would be a phone call made without cameras, a meeting without leaks, a decision that wouldn't impress anyone on social media. Because survival isn't cinematic, it's practical. The sun climbed higher, warming the windshield. Morning joggers passed his parked car without a second glance. To them, he was just another man sitting alone, thinking too hard before the day began. And maybe that was the strangest part of all. After a lifetime of being watched, analyzed, photographed, and interpreted, his turning point might happen completely unseen. No balcony, no spotlight, just a man in exile realizing that the hardest journey isn't away from home. It's back toward responsibility, on terms that don't flatter the ego, don't guarantee forgiveness, and don't come with applause. He started the engine again, not to run, not this time, but because standing still had finally become heavier than moving forward.